Ever had that instant sinking feeling where you think you've passed up on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, only for it to disappear like a puff of smoke in your hands? Perhaps you should have said yes to that job opportunity, or maybe you should have trusted your gut when that new business deal landed on your lap. In many cultures, luck is considered to be an almost sentient force, the personified embodiment of something outside of human understanding, driving us to make wild decisions that will alter the very course of human history. But bad luck? Well, that's when you get jaw-dropping stuff like this. From the most foolish business deal in history to terrifying ecological disasters. Here's the 15 most expensive mistakes in all of history.
Ford Edsel and gives us his theories as to why the car almost bankrupted Ford.
The $800 slice of apple. All right, what better way to begin with a big old heaping of hindsight pie? Well, apple pie, technically. You see, having a slice in Apple, the technological overlords that have managed to carve their place in human history thanks to the ingenious design advances of the late and legendary Steve Jobs, is pretty much equivalent to owning your own golden goose.
And at that moment in time, Steve Jobs says, we are going to form a company.
Ever since the rise to the top of the technological tower in the early 2000s, owning a stake in Apple has been a surefire way to print money, thanks to the almost cult-like status that the company has earned. However, every champion has their own origin story, and for one guy who's owned a slice of the pie in the early days of Apple, betting on the wrong metaphorical horse earned him one of the costliest business mistakes in all of human history. In the early days of Apple, there were 3 men who believed in the business enough to pitch in their own financial stakes: Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and a man named Ronald Wayne, the little-known third co-founder of the company. Incredibly, Wayne was actually the main financial contributor to the company, and as their business endeavor initially failed to pick up attention, he figured he'd lose a bulk of his investment. You see, while Wozniak and Jobs were young and broke, Wayne had assets, a house, a family, and he feared he'd lose it all for their technological dream. Ultimately, in 1976, he sold his 10% stake in the company back to the other founders for a measly $800. Today, with a market cap of over $1 trillion, that 10% stake would have been worth $95 billion. Yikes! Now let's get ready for today's missing topic. Okay, while we're on the subject, let's turn your attention toward this hair-raising image that seemingly shows a highway bridge and overpass in Hanshin, Japan, that has been uprooted following one of the deadliest environmental disasters in history, the 1995 Great Hanshin Earthquake. While there have been countless earthquake disasters throughout Japanese history, this one served to completely revamp the way that Japan approached their urban planning in the future, as they quickly realized that there was no stopping the devastating force of Mother Nature. It's the solution to a problem that seems all too common in recent decades. Let us know your thoughts on the matter in the comment section below by using the hashtag #MissingTopic. Before we move on, smash that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell right now. If you don't, a venomous viper will appear in your bed tonight. So do what's best for you. Worst trade deal of all time: Russia sells Alaska. Okay, let's get back on the subject of the worst trade deals of all time, and thankfully for us, we only need to peer out our heads through history to quickly find this calamitous red-faced moment. Have you ever looked at a map of the United States, took one glance at the state of Alaska and thought, that seems like a weird border. I wonder what happened there? Well, while it's no secret that Alaska was sold by the Russian government to the United States for the reason of national security, the actual mechanics behind this historical deal are pretty embarrassing in hindsight. The main glaring question is, why did history's third biggest empire sell their own overseas territory, which would later prove to be a tactical treasure trove for geopolitics? And the answer is frighteningly simple. Russia was broke. Throughout the 19th century, Russia was no stranger to war, and the empire had accumulated an insane level of debt on the world stages. So what do you do when you're broke? You sell your assets. As a 500,000 square mile territory, Alaska was pretty costly to defend anyway, and so they jumped at the chance to shift it to the United States. After drawing up a much discounted deal, the two countries agreed to the price of $7.2 million for Alaska. There was just one tiny thing that they didn't account for. Alaska is full of oil, and with a yearly gross state product of around $50 billion, Russia sold one of the most valuable territories on the planet for pretty much nothing. Oops. Deepwater Horizon. While modern history is filled with some pretty hilarious economic blunders, the other side of that coin is far less comical. From an ecological perspective, the Deepwater Horizon disaster is one of the most devastating events in our planet's history, and ever since the infamous oil spill occurred in the Gulf of Mexico back in 2010, scientists are still scrambling to uncover the full extent of the damage. At the turn of the last decade, the BP oil company was working on closing up an exploratory oil well deep under the Gulf of Mexico when the drill team hit an unknown pocket of gas which shot up, buckling the drill pipe. The emergency shutoff valve designed to stop the well surge failed, and the gas pocket reached the drill rig, triggering an explosion that tragically killed 11 crew members. Over the next 3 months, the uncapped well leaked more than 300 Olympic-sized swimming pools of oil into the Gulf of Mexico's waters, making it the biggest oil spill in U.S. history. Comparatively, it pumped out 12 times more oil than the Exxon Valdez spill of 1989. And as you may imagine, the environmental ramifications that resulted from the disaster are still being felt to this day, as the devastating oil population mercilessly destroyed the lives and habitats of millions of marine wildlife, damages that still continue on to this day. The Spanish submarine. Throughout history, governments, empires, and kingdoms across the planet have tried their utmost to build and develop the biggest and baddest war machines that they can muster. But in regard to this next colossal blunder, it seems that bigger isn't exactly always better. Take a look at the S-80, a colossal submarine commissioned by the Spanish government that claimed to be one of the largest subs ever to float. As it seems, their boastful boat didn't exactly hit the mark. Hey, it's the size that counts, and even if you manage to build the largest naval vessel in history, it's worthless if you can't even fit it in its dock. After spending almost 900 million euros on the machine, the Spanish Navy were horrified to discover that it was too large to fit in the docks at Cartagena, one of Spain's primary naval ports. The only solution to this staggeringly costly incident was for the Navy to dredge the Spanish naval base and completely reshape the docks, purely to fit their immensely costly new submarine. And believe it or not, that's not the only comical calamity that had befallen this marine machine. Yeah, back in 2013, after the S-80 was initially unveiled to the public, it was revealed that the submarine was actually too heavy to even float on the water, a design flaw that should have probably been ironed out beforehand. Yeah, we're pretty sure this sub is cursed. Howie Hubler's trading losses. For most people, the breakneck world of Wall Street and investment banking is a lifestyle that we're not cut out for, instead choosing to bury our heads in the sand when it comes to stocks, shares, shorts, and other shenanigans. But there's one thing that we all can't ignore: a market crash. While the financial crisis of 2008 served to be the springboard for the vast majority of political and economical chaos that we're feeling today, there is one man that's become the unwitting icon for this befuddled era. However, Hubler, a day trader who became the dim-witted villain of one of the costliest financial mistakes in history, as a top Morgan Stanley bond trader, Howie Hubler was relatively good at what he did, making some smart trades throughout the early 2000s that landed him in the big news. However, in 2006, when Hubler was put in charge of his own Morgan Stanley hedge fund, he began purchasing huge investments in mortgage insurances. For the next year or so, Hubler made a series of successful short trades in risky subprime mortgages. But to fund his trades, he sold insurance on slightly better AAA-rated mortgages that the market considered to be less risky. As it turned out, both of them were completely worthless, resulting in the second largest trading loss in history. Howie Hubler's mistake cost Morgan Stanley $9 billion during the 2008 financial crisis, triggering an unprecedented economic plummet across the planet. Oops. Space Shuttle Challenger. Space, as they say, is the final frontier, and the ranks of brave men and women who have risked their lives in the pursuit of our species one day leaving this pale blue dot deserves to be immortalized for the rest of humankind. Space travel is a dangerous endeavor, a truth that all astronauts understand when they sign up for the job, and the most costly error in spacefaring history is without a doubt the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster of January 28, 1986. Throughout its tenure, the Challenger spacecraft completed 9 milestone missions during nearly 3 years of service, resulting in 62 days, 7 hours, 56 minutes, and 22 seconds spent in space, even hosting the first ever spacewalk of the Space Shuttle program. However, during its 10th mission, the shuttle exploded just 73 seconds after liftoff, killing all 7 crew members in the process. It was an event that was televised across the planet, and the horror that ensued served to change the NASA space program forever. After a lengthy investigation and inquiry into the Challenger disaster, it was determined that the explosion was caused by the failure of O-ring seals used in the joints of the vessel that were not designed to handle the unusually cold conditions that existed during the launch. It remains to be the biggest disaster in NASA's history, and is one that they won't soon forget. New Coke. As one of the most profitable companies on the planet, you may be surprised to find the Coca-Cola Corporation on this calamitous list, but it seems that even these giants of the advertisement world can fall flat on their face given the right ingredients, or should we say, the wrong ingredients. You see, in the dark corners of Coca-Cola's history, there's one day, known as Black Tuesday, that remains to be one of the most expensive mistakes in the company's history. On April 23, 1985, Coca-Cola decided to make an appeal to the younger generation by replacing its signature soda with a sweeter version, New Coke. To say that it didn't go down well is an understatement, as the brand new carbonated beverage quickly became a national disgrace. In fact, the New Coke experiment only lasted a few months, where it was then quickly pulled off every shelf in the United States before presumably being incinerated and forgotten forever. At the height of their disgruntlement, Coca-Cola were receiving over 8,000 call complaints a day. And all in all, the New Coke debacle cost the company more than just financial prestige.
Thousands of you would phone and write asking us to bring back the classic taste of original Coca-Cola.
It cost them their reputation. As the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The Vesa warship. Alright, while the vast majority of these colossal mistakes have occurred in the modern era, we need only turn our attention toward ancient history before discovering some of the most disastrous mistakes of all time. While you may think that the Vikings of Scandinavia are the ingenious, bloodthirsty, and opportunistic invaders that early humans portray them as, after mellowing out from their days of Viking warfare, they're not entirely innocent when it comes to these embarrassing historical blunders. Famed for being some of the greatest shipbuilders in history, back in 1628, King Gustav II of Sweden ordered the construction of the world's most high-tech warship, the Vasa, a 223-foot vessel equipped with an unprecedented 64 cannons that was billed to be Sweden's decorated claim to take back their top spot on the 7 seas. However, after it was unveiled to crowds of adoring Swedes and launched out into the ocean, its maiden voyage lasted just 20 minutes. As it turned out, all those cannons may have weighed a little too much, and the Vasa quickly plunged to the bottom of the ocean, killing all 30 crewmen on board. It will go down as the most colossal failure in naval architectural history. Shanghai's Lotus Riverside apartment complex collapsed. As one of the most rapidly expanding civilizations in modern history, throughout the past 50 years, China has witnessed an unprecedented surge in engineering and construction megaprojects, building a mind-blowing number of skyscrapers, dams, and every other urban expansion that you can dream of. However, sometimes quantity doesn't always equate to quality, and China has seen its fair share of inconsistent construction standards in the past few decades. One of the most glaring reminders of these engineering inconsistencies is with Shanghai's Lotus Riverside complex, an apartment project that collapsed back in 2009 that killed one worker and affected the lives of countless others. Incredibly, before the project had ever been completed, the developers of the building had already sold 489 out of 629 flats in the 13-story building, leaving these new homeowners without a home. It's believed that engineers failed to consider the project's riverside location, and a recent rise in water levels resulted in unstable piles of dirt beneath the building that led to its collapse. Quaker Oats buys Snapple. Everyone loves Snapple, right? Well, as it turns out, not everyone, because despite being one of America's leading alternative drink brands, known for its exotic juices and iced teas, Snapple also witnessed one of the most disastrous trade deals in U.S. corporate merger history. Back in 1995, Quaker Oats put up an unprecedented $1.7 billion to buy out the trendy drinks maker Snapple, which had painstakingly become a household name ever since it was founded in 1976. Hoping that they'd manage to bag the merger deal of the decade, Quaker Oats quickly realized that their investment might not be all it was made out to be. And just 27 months after they bought Snapple, they were forced to sell to Triarch for just $300 million. $1.4 billion less than what they paid for it. Lake Penyor sinkhole. While the previously mentioned Deep Horizon disaster is certainly one of the most devastating ecological events of all time, one of the strangest oil rig accidents is the infamous spill in Lake Penyor in Louisiana. On the morning of November 21st, 1980, an oil rig team from Texaco noticed that their drill had seized up below the surface of the shallow lake, and the team of 12 quickly became baffled as to why they couldn't free their drill. Then suddenly, following a series of loud pops, the platform began to tilt toward the water, and after all of them scrambled to swim to shore, they noticed that the lake had changed. As it turned out, the Texaco team had managed to transform a 10-foot deep freshwater lake into a 200-foot deep saltwater sinkhole after drilling through into a penetrated mine shaft. Amazingly, the unexpected miners all managed to escape from the flooding underground system, and no one was injured in the Lake Penyor sinkhole disaster. The Ford Edsel failure. Back in the 1950s, the automotive giant Ford was one of the most ambitious car companies on the planet. Although most of the endeavors undertaken by the pioneering car mogul have become resounding successes, not all of their swings have been hits, and their most calamitous mistake came after the company had poured millions into hiring some of the brightest minds under the leadership of Henry Ford II. The Ford Motor Company hired a hotshot new group dubbed the Whiz Kids to come up with a completely original brand to slot between Ford and Mercury. They decided on naming it Edsel, and if you're scratching your head wondering why you've never heard of it, it's because Edsel became the most short-lived automotive brand in history. From the start, the first Edsels built were plagued with production problems, as it quickly emerged that no one knew what they were really building. On top of that, the public didn't really understand Edsel either, and after an economic recession hit in 1958, the Edsel dream was killed after just a single year of operation, costing Ford hundreds of millions of dollars. Oops. Excite passes on Google. We hate to burst this bubble, but during the dot-com boom of the late 90s and early 2000s, it seems that some of the craziest financial mistakes passed across the desks of countless business executives across the planet. And while we've already mentioned the Apple debacle back in the dark ages of the internet, 1999, the then leading search engine, Excite.com, had the opportunity to purchase Google for just $750,000. If you've never heard of Excite.com, then don't worry, because their failure to recognize a prime opportunity quickly proved to be their downfall. But at the time, they were the second most popular search engine on the planet, second only to Yahoo. To cut a long story short, just 2 years later, Excite filed for bankruptcy, whereas Google now enjoys revenues of $160 billion. When opportunity comes knocking, make sure you answer the door. Unclaimed lotto ticket. All right, on the topic of obscene amounts of money, feast your eyes on this impossibly cruel story that became one of the costliest mistakes in history for a young couple from Britain. After celebrating their first wedding anniversary, Martin and Kay Tott caught word of a TV appeal about an unclaimed lotto jackpot, and they quickly recognized the numbers as their own. Unfortunately for them, it appeared that they'd lost the ticket, and after tearing their apartment apart looking for it, it seemed that the €3 million win was a pipe dream. After investigating their claim for over 7 weeks, the lottery determined that their claim was genuine, and they were satisfied that the couple had indeed purchased the ticket. However, as there was a 30-day time limit on reporting lost tickets, it was concluded that the company had no legal obligation to pay up, and they didn't. Ouch. That one hurts. Waterworld. And finally, for our last trip into this cringeworthy world of expensive historical mistakes, let's take a look at one of the costliest mistakes in cinematic history, Kevin Costner's Waterworld. Now, we know what some of you may be thinking, but hold that thought for a moment. You see, while Waterworld is known as one of the most colossal failures in Hollywood history, losing over $100 million at the box office after its release back in 1995, as the old saying goes, time is a great healer. As it turns out, while Waterworld was torn to shreds by critics, went way over budget, and caused the studio an insane amount of financial chaos, now in 2020, the expensive mistake of a movie is enjoying somewhat of a renaissance. Sure, while there's no coming back from most of the colossal mistakes on this list, sometimes it's all a matter of perspective. Waterworld may have been a massive financial flop at the time, but after 25 years of maturing, it's one heck of a movie. Sometimes you just gotta find the right audience. Well, there we have it, the 15 most expensive mistakes in all of history. Make sure to let us know your thoughts down below by using the hashtag #MissingTopic. As always, thanks for sticking around all the way until the end. You've been watching Missing Files. See you next time.